Good morning. My name is Chris Fenton. I'm the technical trainer for Melco. What we're going to be going over today are two fairly simple settings that you can do to the machine that could really affect the sew quality in regards to thread breaking, fray breaks, snap breaks, things of that nature. So what we're going to be going over first is called needle case calibration. I would like to point out that the procedure that we're going to be going through on this EMT 16 Plus here also will work on XTSs and XTs. It is a different procedure for the Melco Amaya red and whites. So again, we can do XT, XTS, EMT 16, EMT 16 Plus, and of course all of the corresponding Bravo machines of those same makes. So again, the first one that we're going to start with is needle case calibration. So essentially what needle case calibration is, it is the left and right position of the needle in reference to the spindle in the rotary hook that the bobbin snaps over. So we need our needle positions left and right to be direct center of that spindle. A thing that's unique to Melco only, to the best of my knowledge, is that we are able to set the needle case calibration for each individual needle position 1 through 16. So we can get each needle position dialed in right on, and they should sew great after we set this needle case calibration. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and remove our needle plate, because we are going to use needle number 1 as our guide. So to remove your needle plate, on the right and the left side of the black arm, there are 2 screws that come up from the bottom, and we just take those screws out, and that will allow us to remove the needle plate off of the black arm of the machine. So with the needle plate removed, the reason that we take the needle plate off is, as I mentioned before, we're using needle position number 1 as our guide or as our starting point. So I want to make sure that I get the position left and right of needle number 1 as spot on as I can. So in our operating software, we're going to go to Tools, Maintenance, and Head Timing. In the operating software, when you are in the head timing menu, certain keys come alive on the user interface that will allow you to rotate the Z-axis to certain positions. So the position that we need to start with to check this needle case calibration is what's called bottom center in the head timing menu through the operating software. We can achieve bottom center on the user interface by hitting the adjustment key and the down arrow. So if I hit the adjustment key and the down arrow, you will notice that the needle has rotated on the machine for the needle number 1 position. If we looked at our operating software, we would see our current Z position reads 180 degrees, which is bottom center. So the reason that it is 180 is a sewing stroke is based off of 360 degrees. Half of 360 is 180. So you're now at the bottom of the stroke. So what we're looking for now is, this is the spindle that the needle needs to be lined up with left and right. So if I take a look at this one, it looks as if to me that we are just a little bit to the left of center line of the spindle. So I'm going to come to the user interface, and I'm going to do a wiper up arrow, which is going to allow me to bring the needle up to its head up position. And then I can now move the needle case left or right by using the user interface again. In normal operation, this button that's on the top left is a trace. When we are in head timing menu, this becomes a micro step. So I'm going to hold this button in and I'm going to take it just one click to the right, and you're going to hear the needle case actually move. And now I have moved the whole needle case a little bit to the right. Now I'm going to do my adjustment and my down arrow. And I am again going to look at the position of my needle relative to the spindle right here that the bobbin snaps over. As you can see, I am pretty good center line right there. So I have set the home position or the needle centering or the needle case calibration for needle number 1. So I am again going to do a wiper up arrow or adjustment up to get my needle to the upper position. And I'm going to reinstall my needle plate loosely. Then I will drop my needle back down and I will center the needle plate hole to needle number 1. Then when I'm doing my calibration on my other 16 or 15 needles, I am going to use the needle plate hole as my guide instead of using that spindle. So my needle plate is on. I've got a little bit of free play left and right in my needle plate. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do adjustment down, which is going to take my needle to the lowest position. As you can see right now, the needle is on the left side of the needle plate hole. Well, the reason I left my needle plate loose is so I can adjust. And now I have that needle center of the needle plate hole. I've tightened my needle plate now. It is snug. So my next step again is adjustment up. Top right, right under the status light is your color change button. And I will hold that in and I will use the right arrow. The machine has now color changed to needle number 2. Adjustment down. I have now taken my needle down to its lowest position again. And now what I'm using as a reference is the needle going through the needle plate hole. Is the needle going through the center of the needle plate hole? If it is, the needle case calibration for this particular needle, needle number 2, is correct. If it was incorrect, I would do an adjustment up arrow. And then I would use my trace button and my left or right arrow, and I would move the needle case a little bit each direction I needed to go. I would do an adjustment down and check my centering left and right to the needle plate hole. So as you can see, needle number 2 is pretty well centered right up. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go through and we're going to check all 16 needle positions. Because again, with the Melco product, we can set the position of all 16 needles individually. So we want to make sure that each of them are dialed in right as they should be. So I'm going to do an adjustment up. I'm going to color change over to needle number 3 and adjustment down. And again, as you can see, the needle centering appears to be right on where it needs to be. So we're going to continue our process all the way through all 16 needles. That one, as you can see, we are shading to the left side of the needle plate hole. So I'm going to do an adjustment up. I'm going to use my trace button, and I'm only going to go one push over to the right. I'm going to go adjustment down, and now you can see that needle is in the center of the needle plate hole. So the question that came in was, how often does this need to be done? I would do it on an as needed basis, if that makes sense. If you're starting to have issues with your machine, thread breaks, needle breaks, things of that nature, this would be a part of the troubleshooting step that I would do for that. So we're going to do a adjustment up, and we're going to go over to our next needle again, and we're going to do an adjustment down. Looks good. A micro step when we are moving the needle is 0.08 of a millimeter. So it's not a huge movement, but it is a critical movement. So again, on this needle position, you can see we're shading a little bit to the left side of the needle plate hole. So I'm going to do an adjustment up to bring my needle to the head up position. And I'm going to do the trace button and one click of the micro step. I'm going to come back down, and you can see again, we are now perfectly center line of that needle plate hole. So adjustment up, color change over, adjustment down. That one looks good. Color change over. And again, we are checking this on all 16 needle positions. So it is possible for one needle position to get out of adjustment left and right, but the other 15 will be where they're supposed to be. So that is a reason that you need to go through and check all 16 positions. And again, this is the same procedure for XTs, XTSs, EMT 16s, and EMT 16 pluses. Now, when we're done, we've got one step that we have to do in the operating software. Anytime we make a change to this, we need to do this last step that we're going to do. As you can see on this needle position, needle 14, it's really shaded over to the left side of the needle plate hole. So I only like to do the micro steps in one step increments though. So again, I'm going to come over and just do my one step increment. I'm going to drop it down, and I'm going to see what I think. We're still shaded a little bit to the left side. So I'm going to do an adjustment up, and I'm going to take it again one more step to the right. And I'm going to take it down. And now you can see that needle is right in center of that needle plate hole. And this should be needle 16, our last check. And 16 also looks good. So I'm going to do an adjustment up arrow. I'm going to leave the machine on needle 16, and I'm going to go to the operating software. In the operating software, I'm going to come over and I'm going to go to the calibration tab. And I'm going to open the calibration tab, and as you can see, we've got get table, set table, and default table. What get table is, which is the one that we are going to use, is we are taking all of the coordinate positions we just set with each individual needle, and we're going to save it to the operating software. So if I come on and I click on Get Table, you get a pop-up that says you are about to get the color change calibration table from the machine and store it in the Melco OS. Do you wish to continue? Yes. And we get a dialog box that's confirmed that we have done the save. Now, set table would be taking it from the operating software and sending that information to the embroidery machine. So that completes needle case calibration. It is not a very difficult procedure to go through, but my best recommendation would be take your time and make sure you get them centered. It's going to save you a lot of heartache in the end. It is for Bravo. The question is if it was for Bravos. It is for Bravos also. This procedure that we just stepped through will work on everything out there except for the original Amaya red and whites. They do not have this capability. Very good question was if you're off far enough and you go to take the needle to the down position, would the needle strike outside of the needle plate hole and break the needle? Yes, that is a possibility. Two things that you could do to avoid that is you could use the left and once you set needle number 1, you can look where that needle is in reference to the presser foot. So the presser foot sits behind the needle, your needle's here. If you're a little bit to the left of the hole in the presser foot on number 1, and then you go to needle number 2, with this being the presser foot and your needle is like way over here, you would micro step the needle case previous to dropping the needle down. So that would save you from striking the needle plate hole if the calibration was way off. So, yes, I believe that, yeah. So our next step that we're going to do now is needle depths. Needle depths is again a needle specific setting. And this is how far at bottom center, which is 180 degrees, does the needle penetrate into the rotary hook. You're kind of getting the same symptoms with needle depth that you might get with needle case calibration. It's going to be a sew quality issue with more regards to thread breaks, skip stitches, misstarts also, things of that nature. What could cause needle depth to change? The perfect example I use in my tech training classes is you have a design that fits in a 15 centimeter round. So that's what you select in the operating software. But then you put a 12 on the machine. So the hoop on the machine is actually smaller than what you've selected in the software. You trace the design, but you're not watching the machine when you trace. So you don't see the red little laser get outside onto the hoop. But because you have a 15 selected, the machine thinks it's going to fit. You go to sew, the needle strikes a hoop. That needle striking the hoop could change the needle depth for that needle position. So in the operating software, I'm going to go back to the steppers page and I'm going to go ahead and go to color change and I'm going to click the home tab. What that's going to do is that is going to move the needle case all the way to needle number 1 for me. And then I'm going to go to head timing again, because when I'm in the head timing menu, I have hotkeys that come alive on the user interface that are going to help me. So if we go to the embroidery machine, EMT 16 pluses, EMT 16s, and the Melco Bravo, they have this needle case cover that has the additional felt thread guide right here. So we're going to need to get access underneath this cover. So I'll give you a preemptive apology. You're going to have to re-thread your needles again. So we go ahead and just remove this cover. It's only a magnetic cover. So now we have access to the area that we're going to need to get to do needle depth. You can do needle depth with the needle plate on or the needle plate off. I personally like doing it with the needle plate off because I need the light. If you've got good eyes, you don't have to take the needle plate off. If you can see in there, you're just as fine. But for me, needle plate off helps me out. So before we actually do it on the machine, I would like to show you in the operator or the technical manual where this instruction can be found. So if you go to our service website, which is www.melco-service.com, great website, use it whenever you can. We have manuals for the majority of all of the machines. So the one that we're going to go to is for the EMT 16 Plus. And you'll notice on this page, we've got the operator's manual, we've got the technical manual, and we've got the parts manual. The one that we're going to go into is the technical manual. Once we're in the technical manual, you can do a Control F, which is a find function, and it'll give you this dialog box right up here. And in that box, you can type in keywords that you're looking for. As you can see, I just typed in needle depth. And with it being needle depth, it has taken me straight to the instruction for setting the needle depth by eye. So what I really wanted to point out on this page, which I believe is very helpful, is these two pictures right here. So what it's showing us is where the picture on the left is showing us is where we're looking at on the machine for needle depth. And then the picture on the upper right is giving you what half an eye of needle depth looks like. So our spec is at bottom center, which is 180 degrees, that we want half of the eye of the needle showing in the basket of the rotary hook. So again, we're back to our operating software. And when I'm in the head timing menu, again, to reiterate, I've got hotkeys that become alive that allow me to do really unique functions. So when I'm checking needle depth, if I use the frame back button, which is the fourth down on the left, it's going to drop needle number 1 to the needle depth position for me. I can check my needle depth, make the adjustment if I need to. I hit frame back again, it's going to raise needle number 1 up. It's going to automatically color change the machine to number 2. and it's going to take number 2 to the needle depth position. So that's what we're going to start with, and I'm just hitting the frame back button. And if we went to the software real quick, Nate, you can see that our current Z position says 180 degrees. That's our needle depth position. That's where we need to be. It'll always be 180, yes. It might tink between like 179.9 to 180.1, but yes, so now we're going to actually look at the mechanical setting of our needle depth. This is where we need to see a half of the eye of the needle into the basket of the rotary hook. And oh wow, that lighting's perfect. You could really see the eye and everything. That looks great. So you could see right here, there is the eye of the needle. And what we are looking for is half of that eye into the basket of the rotary hook. Now, what you're probably saying now is that looks deeper than a half of an eye. Well, through the camera it does, because the camera is at an angle that is looking down. No, we're okay. So when you're actually setting the needle depth, you need to look on a straight plane as flat as possible, and then you will get and you'll be able to have your reference point at that time. So the needle depth on needle number 1 looks very good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my frame back button. And we're going to, when we get to like needle 5, if we need an adjustment, we will go ahead and do an adjustment. So I'm going to hit my frame back button. It automatically took the machine to head up. It color changed over to needle number 2. And now we are checking our needle depth on needle number 2. Which is showing about a full eye. So 2 things that could cause an issue here. I highly doubt the needle depth is that far out of adjustment. I don't think the needle is seated all the way up in the needle bar. So that will be my first check, is I will loosen the clamp that holds the needle in. And now we are at half of an eye. So the needle was not seated all the way into the needle bar. So another example of how needle depth can change if you don't have a needle seated all the way up into the needle bar. So needle depth looks good. We're going to go ahead and go over to our next one now. Our frame back button. And that one looks good. And we'll get over into the middle and we'll reset one here, because all of these needle depths look right on. Okay, let's do one more. Okay. Okay. So Nate took us over to the software for a minute because he's going to redo the camera real quick to get us a little better view of what we're going to be adjusting on the needle depth itself. So again, all of these needle depths have looked right on to me, but we need to do one as an example so that you'll understand the concept of doing the needle depth setting. Now again, this is a needle specific setting. So each needle bar has its own clamp. So you can again have 15 needle bars that are set right up. Oh, very nice. And one could be messed up with the scenario that we described earlier. So we're going to set this needle depth. You can see right here, this is a clamp that has an Allen screw coming in the side of it. Now, if I look at the other needle bars on either side, you'll notice that the clamps are way up on top. The only time you can access that clamp is when that needle position is at needle depth or bottom center or 180 degrees, whichever terminology works best for you. So in your operator's kit with your machines, I'll try to get this. You will get this little stubby nosed 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. That is what this wrench is specifically for, is for setting needle depths. So because I am at the bottom center position, I can now come in from the side and I can get my Allen wrench on that clamp. And I'm just going to loosen up that set screw. I'm not going to do a hole really loose on it, but I'm going to get it pretty loose because I need to be able to slide that needle bar up and down. So now that I have that clamp loose, I can actually grab the needle bar itself, and you're going to see that needle. How come it's locked? Not changing on the... Yeah. Technical difficulties, sorry. Yeah, accidents happen. I'd like to use this camera when I was setting needle depths all the time. Yeah, that was... Oh, the needle case calibration? Yeah, so we had a second question again of how often to check the needle case calibration. It's not something that, like Scott said, is going to erode over time. But if I'm having problems with the machine in regards to thread breaking, but in regards to thread breaking, there's a lot of things that we as operators control that could cause thread breaking also. So we need to eliminate all of that stuff first before we start looking at needle case calibration. My active feed minimum needs to be correct for my type of material. My presser foot needs to be correct for my type of material. My bobbin tension needs to be correct. My needle eye orientation needs to be correct. So my hooping needs to be good. So there's a lot of things that I'm going to check first before I go to the needle case calibration. So hopefully that answered your question. And again, needle depths, going to be the same thing. If I'm having issues with a specific needle with thread breaking and things of that nature, after I've checked the stuff that I just listed, yeah, then I'm going to take a look at the needle case calibration and the needle depth. Correct. Yep. Well, let's put it this way. So the question was, needle depth is going to maintain or be the same for all different brands of needles. The answer for that is no, but let's put it this way. You're not going to be able to see the difference with your naked eye. So just because you went from an Oregon to a Grossbecker, you don't have to redo needle depth. Quite okay. Well, can we try to get the big one just so I can show the needle bar moving up and down? So, apologize, but the camera we were using to do the close-up shots is malfunctioning. So we're going to try to do our best with the other camera. Okay, that's okay. So this clamp right here is the one that I have loosened. And now with it loose, watch the needle bar or the clamp that holds the needle in. I am able to slide it up and down. See how the clamp's way up high now? And now the clamp's down low. So that's how I am achieving my 1/2 eye of needle inside the basket of the hook. So once I get that setting to where I need it, there is one other setting that I need to be aware of. And I don't know if you have noticed it or not with your machines, but the clamp that holds the needle in, if you'll notice, you look at all your machines, they're rotated to the right. So there's actually a reason for that, is because we want the thread, when it comes by this needle clamp, to hit the smooth polished area. If these clamps were facing with the screws straight out, what if one of them screws that holds the needle in had a little burr on it? The thread's going to run right in front of that burr and it's going to cause you a thread break. So that's the reason that those clamps are all rotated, I don't know, what would you say, 20, 25 degrees to the right. Well, needle depth is what controls the rotational, not only the up and down position of the needle bar, but the rotational position of the needle bar. So I have just set the needle depth on that needle. Since we lost that camera, I'm going to come back and this is what I have achieved. I have got about 1/2 of the eye of the needle in the basket of the hook. So that's my optimum hook timing position. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tighten this clamp again. When tightening this clamp, get it tight and then just a little more. You can break those clamps if you over tighten them. So I have now got the needle depth set on that needle. I'm going to hit my frame back button and I'm going to go through and do a visual on my remaining needle positions. Okay, so my remaining needle positions, my needle depths looked where they were supposed to be. So now, in order to get out of the sequence of this frame back button, lowering the needle, raising the needle, and changing the needle position, all I'm going to do now is take the machine to head up manually, which is the adjustment in the up arrow. And now I'm back to normal function for the frame back button. So that has completed our needle depth. So when we're done with needle depths, again, we're going to reinstall our needle plate. And anytime I take a needle plate off, I center it every time I put it back on. There is enough slop in that needle plate that if I just throw it on there and I don't center it, I can put that needle to one side or the other of that needle plate hole. And when I'm sewing, if I get some needle deflection, I could introduce needle breaks into the system. So again, my needle plate's on loose. I'm going to do an adjustment down, and I'm just going to center my needle plate to the needle and lock it in. Now, I can do this on any needle position because I have already set my needle case calibration, and we know all 16 needles are centered. So I don't have to go to a specific needle position to center my needle plate. So that is it on doing needle case calibration and needle depths. Again, to reiterate, it's not something that you're going to have to do, say, as a weekly maintenance. It's something that you're going to do that you're driven to have to check this. Spike a hoop, needle depth. Thread breaks, maybe take a look at the needle case calibration. But we discussed other things already that you need to check before. You jump right to this. Hooping, active feed minimum, presser foot, bobbin tension, needle eye orientation. All of that stuff needs to be addressed first. After you've done that, you're still having the problems. That's when you're going to go to your needle case calibration and your needle depth. And also remember that this could be needle specific. So if you're having one problem with one needle position, you would want to do these checks. So thank you very much for your time. I apologize for the camera. Hopefully it didn't affect us too awful much, and I hope everybody has a good day. Thank you.